Does what you're thinking about prove that you have an immaterial mind? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. In the last video started some objections to materialist views of mind. And materialist views of mind would say that all the stuff that we're talking about in philosophy of mind, the only thing that really exists are stuff that is made up of matter, right? There's no immaterial things. And we looked at qualia objections last video. Today we'll look at a new objection. So let's say that you see me sitting here and I'm, gazing over yonder, and you ask the question, hey, what are you thinking about? Now, that question makes sense. I might answer something like, oh, I'm thinking about philosophy, right? How much I love it. My thoughts can be about something else, right? They are their own thing, but they refer to some other thing, right? So that aspect of thoughts we call intentionality. It is the aboutness of thoughts. And I can think about things that are present, such as this pencil. I can think about things that are not present, such as my friend Disco Stu, who lives in Washington, D.C. He's, a whole country away from me, on the other side of the country. And I could still think about him, though. I could still refer to him with my thoughts. I could think about things not only that are not present, but things that don't exist. So, for example, the majestic unicorn. Sadly, I know, tears, the majestic unicorn does not exist. And yet I can think about it. So thoughts exhibit this thing called intentionality, this aboutness. But if you saw me sitting here gazing wistfully and you said, hey, what is this pencil about? Now, does that question make sense? Does it make sense to ask what a physical object is about? No. A material object is just what it is. It's not about something else. It just is, right? So material objects do not exhibit intentionality. Now, you may want to call me out on that and say, hold on a second. What about physical objects like words? Words are either vibrations of air, or if you write them down, they're ink on a page or something like that. And yeah, we can say, like, what is this sentence about? What is this word about? But still, those things only have intentionality derivatively, right? The only reason why a word that I would put up on the screen would be about something, would refer to something, would be because it was brought up by a mind, by something with a thought. If instead, for example, paint was blown on a screen by wind that just gusted up, we wouldn't say, hey, what is that about, right? Even if it resembled characters like an alphabet would, we wouldn't think that it was about something. Only when we know that an intelligent agent that was thinking put down characters on a page or spoke words, spoke sounds in some kind of pattern, would we say that those things are about something else. So physical objects, if at all, would only have intentionality derivatively because of thoughts that people would have. Now, these considerations lead to the following argument. Thoughts exhibit intentionality, but material objects do not exhibit intentionality. So therefore, thoughts cannot be material things. There are a couple of possible objections to this argument. And the first one we'll talk about is a reducibility kind of an objection. And there are more than one way to do this, but I'll focus specifically on the causality version of it. And maybe if you check in my description, I have where the notes for this episode will be on my website. Click on those and I'll talk about another major reducibility objection. So this first one goes something like this. Consider an object I, an In-N-Out burger, and consider a thought T. Thought is, that is an In-N-Out burger. Intentionality would be to say that something like T is about I. The thought T is about the object I. But what happens as a result of I being observed is behavior B. I begin to drool and I start to sing, "That's what a hamburger's all about." So I have this behavior B, and it's triggered by object I. So the theory here would say that maybe when we say that T is about I, all we really mean is I causes behavior B. In other words, we would be trying to reduce intentionality to just this causal relation. And if that's the case, then what we can say is that we have intentionality, and yet the intentionality is attached to physical objects rather than these immaterial things called thoughts. So T is about I really just means I causes B. Does this argument work? Does this theory work? One possible response is that even if the theory does work for things like object I in an out burger, it doesn't work for non-existent things. So again, the majestic unicorn, right? Does a unicorn cause me to have a tear come to my eye when I think about how noble it is? No, because there is no such thing as a unicorn, right? So it can't be the case that the unicorn causes the thought in me. Now, that is a good reply. However, you could object to it that, think about where we get the concept of unicorns in the first place, right? Whenever, this is something that people always used to talk about, I don't know, when I first got into the philosophy business, when you watch Star Trek and all the aliens are basically just like humanoid aliens with odd appendages or different colors painted on them, right? They just look like things that you've seen before, but rearranged. And the same thing for a unicorn. Did we generate the concept of a unicorn totally, out of nothing? No. What we did is we saw a horse, we saw a horn, and we thought, what if you just slap those guys together and then you got a unicorn, right? So although a unicorn isn't causing me to think about a unicorn, right? That's not what's happening. Maybe we could say that the horse and the horn put together caused me to have this tear streaming down my eye. Is that a good response? Well, maybe. I don't know. The big problem here is that I'm not, even if those things are causing me to cry, I'm not thinking about those things, right? The content of my thought is not a horse and a horn. The content of my thought is a unicorn, even if it was caused by a horse and a horn. So does that accurately capture intentionality? I don't think so. Another possible reply, though, that you can give is, what about an imposter burger, right? We'll call it this burger X, right? We'll say that the burger I'm looking at is not an In-N-Out burger. It is burger X, which is it looks just like an In-N-Out burger, but is not an In-N-Out burger. Now, when I look at this object X, it might still cause me to have behavior B. It might still cause me to drool and sing, "That's what a hamburger is all about," because I'm deceived about, the burger. It looks like object I, but it is really not object I. Now, if the content of our thoughts is just the causation of an object, then that would mean that imposter burger is really an In-N-Out burger that I'm thinking about. If my content of my thought is an In-N-Out burger, then that must be an In-N-Out burger, but it's not an In-N-Out burger, right? So it must not be the case that the content of my thought is just that burger causing me to have these behaviors. Now, I think you could possibly object to this response. I think you could say something like, well, it's not just the burger itself, but it's also the brain state that you're in. So the fact that In-N-Out burgers have sort of formed your brain in a particular manner such that whenever you see objects that appear to be like In-N-Out burgers, then you have these behaviors come about. And actually, this might actually make a lot more sense, because you're having a thought about In-N-Out burgers, but you're also having a thought about this specific burger you're looking at, which is not an In-N-Out burger, right? So the content of your thought here would be object X and from, previous experience, In-N-Out. So I think you can actually successfully object to this response. What if we had another reply where instead of that we had the same cause but two different contents, right? Two different thought contents. So, for example, I look at object I, and I could have the thought, this hamburger is shaped thusly, right? And I can also look at I and have a thought with the content, this burger tastes like something delicious. So I can have the same cause, right? It's the same cause, which is object I, but it causes two different thoughts in me. Now, if the behavior is the same and the cause is the same, et cetera, and all of that just is the content of my thought, then we shouldn't be able to have two different contents, but we do. So the reply here would be, you can have the same cause bring about two different thoughts. So the cause can't be identical to those thoughts, identical to the content of those thoughts. Now, personally, these are problems for this theory, but I don't think they're the big problem. The big problem for me with this theory is that it's just false. And here's what I mean. On this view, my thought isn't about an In-N-Out burger. My thought just is the In-N-Out burger, right? They're saying that the content of your thought is identical to, is reducible to, right, is nothing more than the object I causing behavior B. And yet, when I observe my thoughts, I observe that they are about something other than what they are, right? So I don't think that this theory works just because, it's obviously false. When you observe what a thought is, thoughts are not just the things that cause them. And I think this is a problem in general for reductivist theories of intentionality. They totally lose intentionality. If you reduce intentionality to some object, then your thought just is that object. It isn't about that object. So I don't think these work. There's another one, an evolutionary approach. Like I said, maybe I'll put that on my website. But let's look at a different possible objection to this argument from intentionality. And this is an objection from Daniel Dennett, and it's very similar to the one that we saw from him in the qualia argument. And it's just as confused. And let me show you what I mean. So Dennett says, we see an object I being perceived. We see the behavior B of drooling and singing the song. And then we go and we posit an intentional object, a thought. We say, there's this, I'm going to explain this behavior B by positing this thing called a thought that is about that object I and that results in this behavior B, when it doesn't really do any explanatory work there, right? The intentionality aspect of a thought doesn't really explain why behavior B comes about. You can get along without positing such a thing. So why do so? Dennett says, we shouldn't posit entities that we don't need. So there's his objection. His objection is, it doesn't explain behavior, therefore we shouldn't posit it. And the reply to this objection is just the same as it was in the qualia arguments. We're not positing anything, right? We're observing. I'm observing the fact that I have a thought, and I'm observing that it's about something else. I'm not looking at somebody else's behavior and trying to explain that behavior by positing some entity. What I'm doing is I'm saying, wow, I just had a thought about an In-N-Out burger. And I can see that, it's about something that is not my thought, like clearly I don't have an In-N-Out burger running around in my brain. An even bigger difficulty, though, for Dennett here is, in this case, his theory would be self-refuting. His theory is about how things work in the brain, right? It's about, right? So his theory has this kind of intentionality, and he wants us to change our thoughts about how the brain works or how the mind works, right? So in other words, like he's appealing to the intentionality of our thoughts with his intentionality of thoughts. So if there is no such thing as intentionality, then there's no such thing as his theory, right? His theory just sort of evaporates. All theories evaporate if he's right. But, specifically, we're looking at his theory. So if he's right, he's wrong, So yeah, this theory is particularly poor because it's self-refuting, and that's a big no-no in philosophy. In any case, there's the argument for the immateriality of the mind from intentionality. If you have any questions on it, please hit me up in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video. Adios.